I had someone DM me recently and asked me, what are the best books that I could be reading to become a master salesperson? And I went into the library and I picked out a handful of them, and I'll share them with you with my brief kind of synopsis of the book. There's a couple that I was thinking about and I wasn't able to find in the library, so I'll just tell you about them and who the authors are. So the first one is this book by a guy named Dr. Robert Cialdini. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he is the godfather of behavioral psychology as it pertains to persuasion. And what he did is he actually studied salespeople, and he found the best salespeople in various different kind of realms, whether they be selling vacuums door to door or roofs, or, widgets or whatever it is that they were selling. And he studied them, and he came up with some core principles that once you understand them and you can use them intentionally and purposefully, like the law of reciprocity, consistency, where people don't like to back away from things that they've said verbally. And there's a handful of others that once you understand them and you can apply them purposefully, becomes exceptionally powerful. So this is an absolute must read if you're serious about being a rockstar salesperson. The next book is by a woman named Dorothy Leeds. It's called The 7 Powers of Questions. So what most people think selling is kind of making statements, and they want to learn a script, right? So that way they can make these statements, where in fact, the highest form of selling is really having a commitment to solving people's problems. And the only way you can decide if you can solve their problems and what those problems are is by asking a series of detailed questions. So this book goes through clearly the powers of those questions and can help you to really get that frame of reference. So therefore, when you're having conversations with people, you're ensuring that you're discovering what their needs and what their true desires are and their goals, and then you can provide solutions to them. The next book is along the same lines. It's by a woman named Linda Richardson. It's a book called Perfect Selling. This is a wonderful little book. It's easy to read, and it really walks through procedurally the process of asking questions, pre-qualifying, presenting, handling objections, and closing. It's one of the best books I've read on that particular process. And as I'm looking through it, I can see notes, that I've taken. So I think it's an absolute must read if you're a serious student of selling and persuasion. The next book is a book written by a guy named Jeffrey Fox. Jeffrey Fox is a master salesperson, and it's called Secrets of Great Rainmakers. And one of the main things I took away from this book is this kind of concept of dollarizing, right? If you can put everything into dollars, because people usually make decisions either for time or money. It's really what you're selling, whatever the product or service is. And if you can put your offerings into those contexts, that increases the probability that, people will be more receptive to what it is that you're sharing with them. He also does a really great job of sharing some mental maps and kind of mindsets of rainmakers. And if you want to be a great salesperson, you want to be a rainmaker. The next book is an oldie but a goodie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is a business that's, centered around people. And being a good people person, is critically important. He gives you some really cool, kind of simple and applicable things that you can do to, ensure that you're doing your best to connect with people in a meaningful way and make it easy for them to connect with you. And really the way that I view these is if our bodies are the hardware, our brains are the software. So really what I'm doing when I'm sharing with you these books, I'm just sharing with you some of my software, right? That I've used, to sell over 2,000 properties in my career, 80% of that business being listings sold. There are a couple more books. One is called Everybody Communicates and Very Few People Connect. That's by John Maxwell. I just couldn't find it in the kind of library. It's a wonderful book, though, and it talks about the difference between communicating and connection. And connection, if you think about it, is like it's like electricity to a Tesla or gasoline to a gas-powered car. Without it, nothing else happens. So he does a really good job of walking through the difference between those two, so that way you can apply that. And the way that I describe that, there's a difference between intellectual intelligence and emotional intelligence. And that book is a really good resource to decipher between the two, so you can apply that in your craft. And then the last book is a book not specifically on selling, but a book that has to do with the way that you see yourself. It's a book called PsychoCybernetics. It's written by a guy named Maxwell Maltz. And Maxwell was a world famous plastic surgeon. And this was way back in the day. So he was one of the first to do it. And he was flying all around the world and, doing plastic surgery for very important, prominent people. And he noticed something. Beauty is about symmetry, right? So it's about the distance between your eyes and your forehead and your nose, right? So he would make people mathematically perfect, symmetrical. And when he held up a mirror, 50% of them would be like, oh my gosh, I look so fantastic. Thanks so much. And 50% would be like, I still feel ugly. So what he realized is the people who reported back that they still feel ugly, they saw themselves as an ugly person. So because of that, it didn't matter what he did externally to make themselves, more symmetrical. And that was super interesting. That was an insight, and he went down the well there. And I believe you can only behave in accordance with the way you see yourself. That's very true. So that book does a really good job of helping you to see yourself in a different way and giving you some techniques and tactics to do that. It took me, 11 years to convince myself I can make 7 figures. But once I've done that, I've never done anything less because that's just how I see myself, right? So that's the list of books. There are, others that I've read, obviously, on various different topics, but this individual asked me specifically, he DM'd me on Instagram and asked me specifically for some books about selling. And, once you read those books, I think you'll be firmly equipped with what you need to become a rock star salesperson. If you like this video, be sure to watch the next one. I had an agent reach out to me recently. He DM'd me on Instagram and said the following. I've been in the business for 2 or 3 years. Last year, I did 40 plus transactions. This year, I only did